For Victims and Villains, my name is Josh, and today we are going to pamper ourselves as we talk about the movie Skincare. Skincare is a pseudo biopic slash based on a true story slash thriller that tells the story of a renowned facialist in Hollywood that on the verge of launching her own skincare line becomes the target of a malicious downfall. So this movie is loosely based on the murder for hire story that broke out a few years ago with renowned facialist Don DeLuise, and that story is fascinating, it's gripping, and I honestly wish I could say the same for its cinematic counterpart, but unfortunately, Skincare lacks in the thrills department. Aside from the breakout performance of Elizabeth Banks, who plays the protagonist of this movie just kind of coasts by. Skincare honestly has the makings more of a true crime Lifetime movie than it does an actual thriller. And that is certainly not a diss at Lifetime original movies. God knows that I have had a few guilty pleasures over the years with these movies. But rather, it is a notice of how the film spends its budget. This movie takes place in roughly around 2 to 3 locations over its 90-minute duration. And honestly, for a story this grand, it feels like it needs to be bigger. And as a result of the decisions to keep this of a more intimate feel, what ends up happening ultimately is you are just kind of left with this thriller that has no thrill, or a story this gripping that should ultimately have more stakes to it. And as a result as well, this movie is just aggressively predictable and generic. If you've seen one movie like Skincare, then you've already seen Skincare. I think the frustrating part about Skincare is that it feels unsure of the story that it's trying to tell or the tone that it's trying to nail down. Ultimately, Skincare doesn't really feel like it knows what it wants to be. Like, yes, it wants to hit those beats of the Lifetime original thrillers that I previously talked about, and it does a decent job at hitting those. But some elements of this film try to bring in the psychological elements, or a horror element, or even introducing later into the film some unwarranted gangster picture elements. And honestly, those elements that they try and throw in, they just never flesh out. They just kind of pop up and then descend as quickly as they showed up. And honestly, it makes Skincare way more messier than it needs to be. Like, I can forgive a film for being generic and predictable, but having these elements into the film as well really make it just a frustrating 90 minutes to get through. There's really nothing remarkable here aside from the performance from Banks. I think she does a phenomenal job given how poorly written a lot of this film is. On the flip side of that, I think the remaining cast surrounding Banks is just kind of passable. There's nothing remarkable to really talk about in terms of other performances in this film. The pacing of this movie is fine, but it really solidifies that comparison to the Lifetime original movies vibe that this movie has, because if you take out the television commercials, they're typically roughly around the same runtime as Skincare. But I'm ready to run this one through the Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give Skincare a 2 out of 5. Outside of the performance here from Banks, this movie feels painfully generic, aggressively predictable, and just at the end of the day, really forgettable. And I honestly really hate to say that because I really was rooting for this film. I love films that take place in this vein, but this movie isn't even bad enough to be considered camp or at the very least a future cult classic because of how forgettable it is. And with that said, Skincare opens up this Friday, August 16th from IFC Films. But let's talk about mental health. If you guys are new to our content here at Victims and Villains, we pick a theme of mental health out of the film which we're reviewing. We'll talk about it for the last few minutes of the video and hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. So in this movie, Michaela J. Rodriguez plays the best friend slash head of PR for the Elizabeth Banks character. And there's a moment in this movie where Rodriguez tells Banks that she has given everything to see this dream unveil for Banks, and this really believes in this big project. And honestly, it's a stark reminder when we talk about healthy community and the positive impact that a good community or even one best friend can really have on our mental health. Find people that will support your dream. Find people that you can root for and champion, not just for yourself, but also for other people. And you'll find that it has a dynamic impact for your mental health. As someone that struggles with anxiety and depression, I can tell you that the friends that I keep in my corner that are not only rooting for me, but checking in on me have had a dynamic impact on my own mental health and are probably arguably still the reason that I'm alive today. Those rainy days where your mental health just doesn't feel like it's up to par, sometimes having people in your community that will root for you can make all the difference in really dispersing those rain clouds and making way for sunshine. So this is a reminder to find yourself healthy community, find yourself great friends that are going to not only root for you, but be there for you. In spite of how crazy life gets, they're going to stick with you 110%. Recently, I was telling a friend between the differences that I view between an acquaintance and a friend. An acquaintance is somebody that you can call on, that you can hang out with, but you don't really go through life with them. A friend is this turning point where life has dealt you an ugly deck of cards, and they are the people that are in the trenches and in the mud with you and going through all of that with you. Find yourself a community that is going to be built on the foundation of friendship and not the foundation of acquaintances. Because acquaintances may only be here for a season, but friendships and the lifelong relationships that you have out of them are going to be here for you for the long haul. Having community is great and it's fantastic, but making sure that you're surrounding yourself with not only a healthy, but the right kind of community is really what's going to be beneficial for your mental health. If you or someone you know is struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, click the links in the show notes below to check out our mental health resource library. Once again, skincare opens nationwide August 16th, this upcoming Friday, from IFC Films, and it stars Elizabeth Banks, Michaela J. Rodriguez, and more. In the show notes below, you guys will find ticket links from Fandango to find out where to catch it in your city. But also at the same time, you guys will also find that subscribe button so that way you never miss any film or mental health conversations right here on YouTube. Plus, we also have links to our social media, our podcast network, more movie reviews like this, ways to support our mental health education efforts through Patreon as well. So until next time, remember to keep it classy. Have a good one.